Woo. My name is Rich. I'm alcoholic. And thanks for inviting me to the party. What an experience to be surrounded by so many of you that have helped me and guided me and steered me along my journey, and to be in the same room with you for 3 days, getting to listen to everyone. And much like Jeff, I stand here with the strength and courage of 1,001 horse right now. I got one horse right now, let's be honest. That'll change in about 3 minutes when I get out of the way. But and I think Jeff and I met at, we have a special bond that you get at some of these men's retreats where they put you in those little camp house rooms that are almost like a sauna, and you share like cots right next to each other, and you sleep like in your underwear with like your backs to each other so it doesn't get too weird. And we talked about our families and being good husbands and dads, and we're pretty certain we would probably talk every day after that. And it's been, 6-7 years, and now we're hanging out again. So that's the value of Stateline to me, amongst other things, as it brings us together with friends from all over the country and all over the world that we wouldn't ordinarily get to see. I was separated from alcohol on August the 30th of 2004. I mentioned that for our new friends. They bring me to things like this for the new person. So if you're doing the math, that means that I have approximately 1/4 of the sobriety of anyone you've heard, right? And I'm kind of like show and tell for the new guy. Like, it doesn't take 40 years to get some relief. And that may be all you get out of my talk, but I'm sure glad you're here. And I say that I was separated from alcohol because I don't want anybody to think that I quit drinking, that I put the plug in the jug, that my best thinking brought me to AA. Those are all things I've heard said in our meetings, and I think, like, wouldn't that have been nice? I mean, but my book tells me that if any of those are true, that makes me non-alcoholic, right? By definition, it implies that I have power, choice, and control whether or not I'm going to, just harness this thing. And the reason that we're going to talk about steps 8 and 9 is because I don't ever remember quitting drinking. I was always stopped, right, from drinking. In my case, and your story may be different, but mine was I run out of money, I end up in a hospital, or I end up in a jail cell, right? And that's called separated from alcohol. Like, it is not a voluntary experience. I honestly I've thought about this. I've meditated to see if it would come. I don't remember one time that it was like a Friday or a Saturday night that I had a bunch of money in my pocket. I had a bunch of drinks in me, and it was like 11 o'clock, and I'm like, well, that was a really good night. Let's head home, right? I don't ever cut it short like that. I'm a warrant drinker. That's important for my step 8 and 9. That means when I drink, it usually ends up in a warrant. Because of my behavior, I generally don't do a bunch of great things. I've never, the next morning, how we ask those ambiguous questions, trying to ferret out what we did last night from our friends, trying to see what really happened, trying to pretend like we kind of know. Nobody ever said, like, that was awesome last night. You were up at the grocery store helping little old ladies unload their groceries. You were just doing all this, helping people across the street, doing all these kind and loving things. When I drink, it doesn't go like that. I think I was kind of a max drinker. This dude from Chicago I've never met or laid eyes on. I'm pretty sure we're related. I knew that within like 5 minutes of his talk, which to me means it's a good one because we identified. And nobody in my family drinks either. We've heard a couple people mention that. So if you're trying to figure out, how this thing came about, I will say that this is really special to me because my sponsor, he's 81, he's got a pacemaker and a defibrillator, and a lot of the doctors, think he's got heart trouble. I think it's because he's just given away so much of it to me in AA for almost 40 years, and he's with me. And he doesn't, travel's really hard for him, getting through security and airplanes, and he didn't want to miss a party. And he doesn't get to see the little idiot he helped do this live. And, I always have to bring him the CDs anytime I get asked to go anywhere because he listens to it. And he says, I want to make sure the story never changes. And you start adding a little something to impress Max, who you just met. Or, I got to keep up with that, right? There's been some great, I better keep up. So he's my truth detector. This great mother and father, hardworking people, one little sister. Love what alcohol does for me. I don't need to talk about it. That's the beauty of these things. Those steps have all been covered. And what happens is I live at the beach. I'm a surfer, but I don't surf anymore. By the time I get to you folks, right, I've given up every joy, every hobby. My family is long since done with me. I went on a soccer scholarship I'm from Ocean City, Maryland, which is a little island 7 miles long by 1 mile wide off the coast of Maryland. So it's about as far from California as you can get. That's why I picked college, because my parents had rules and morality and integrity. And when you behave like I do, you want to get far away. I'm also a jail drinker. I've been checking out the tattoos. I know there's quite a few prison people here. I'm not a prison person. I'm a jail person. In Maryland, jail is any sentence up to 18 months. When you get a longer sentence than 18 months, you go to the Department of Corrections prison. I was always scared of that, to tell you the truth. It represented like a much longer commitment than I was ever willing to make. I'm not good with commitments, and it seemed like a lot of structure in that environment. I'm usually just doing something. If you saw my NCIC, which, by the way, is how we do a fourth and a fifth step, if you do them with Roger, who's sitting here, is you do all the book stuff, right? But then he makes you go pay the $10 to pull your NCIC criminal history. And back then it used to cost, now there's a million services that do it for free. But you pull your credit report, and he's like, these are 3 important documents. This is what you think of your life. This is what law enforcement thinks of your life. And this is what your creditors think, right? And there was some substantial, differences of opinion because I'm a guy that always meant well. I'm not a mean-spirited bad guy. I'm not a malicious. Friday nights when I'm going out, I always mean well. I don't know if you remember the pregame shower where you got that beer or drink in the shower and the sweat's coming down, that hot water's hitting you, right? And you get out of there, and I put a silk shirt on and spray a little girl sauce because I'm going out in L.A. or Vegas that night. And, and I call Bob, and I'm like, hey, Bob. He's like, what are you doing tonight, Rich? Well, Bob, tonight's the night that I'm going to shame my mom to where she can't look her only son in the eye for about a decade. Do you have any plans tonight? I never plan that, right? But that's very much what happened, right? Billy calls, Rich, what are you going to do tonight? Oh, tonight's the night that I'm going to humiliate my little sister to where she doesn't speak a single word to me for 6.5 years. What are you up to? And I never meant for those things to happen, right? And I don't know many drunks that do, because, it's our stories always, when we're explaining them, which is one of the problems, by the way, with those NCIC, those criminal histories, there's no room underneath each thing for explanation. Every one of my convictions has a big story behind it. It's usually never really my fault. I meant for something entirely different to happen than did happen. And just police and prosecutor types and judges, they don't really get us very well. They're just strict. They got names for everything. We're like, Craig and I are figuring out the bar tab, right? I don't know if you guys do that. Our bars close at 2 o'clock. You step out front with your buddy, and whoever gets, punched and knocked to the ground pays the bar tab. If a cop rolls by while that's happening, you know what they call that? Second-degree assault. Really serious, right? I'm like, we're figuring out the bar tab. What are you talking about? But they don't care when they add that stuff up. By the time I go to college out there, I picked the University of San Diego because there was beautiful women like all of you, and 3,000 miles away from my parents and rules and regulations and really good surfing. And so I guess how you're supposed to pick a college, right? If you're living life like I am at that point. I overlooked big time. It was a Jesuit school. I didn't know what Jesuits were or care. I should have looked into that, but I didn't. I pick up on things, much like Bill and most alcoholics I know. I can kind of fit in anywhere, right? And I could figure out the scene, right? You drop me into the middle of a Grateful Dead concert, I'm wearing tie-dye and patchouli, right? We're noodling. We're down, right? And You throw me into a punk rock concert, we're stage diving, right? If I'm at a lacrosse game, I'm an athlete, I'm probably going to be the captain of your team because I'm an achiever, a doer, an accomplisher, right? A driver. Because I need those things. I need those things to be able to look in the mirror. I have to work twice as hard to feel half as good as any person, right? And I get out there and I assess Southern California. Nobody told me this, but I knew that none of you beautiful women were going to want anything to do with a guy like me unless I had some stuff. I was going to need some stuff. I was going to have to be a nice car, some nice clothes. I was going to have to take you out first class. Some flowers or something. You wouldn't just like me for me. And no woman had ever told me, like, you're ugly, you're an idiot, nothing like that. I just somehow had this inward knowing, right, that I wasn't good enough as is. And that launched me on a course that was going to cause a lot of this stuff, right, where I was going to have to start acquiring some stuff. And Bill talks about that. Remember when he's on the farm and he says, like, this would be the last honest day's labor that I would do. The exciting maelstrom of Wall Street was on, right? That's the quick deal, man, the easy buck, right? And that was me, and it would have been nice to have been conscious enough to know I was making that choice. And I'm drinking a lot because I'm getting harder to live with. And what I know from your steps is that when I start violating my own internal principles, whatever I call those, and all of us have different names and nothing could matter less. I hope that words this weekend just bring us together instead of separate, because the best we can do with spiritual stuff is try to talk about it. And words are the best we have. But I don't much care about violating state's laws. I don't care much about my parents' rules. I don't care about your morality. But when I start living against my own, I have two choices, and that's to drink more to blot out the existence, the pathetic existence, my life, the way that I'm living, violating me and what that fundamental thing is inside, whatever we call that, or I can kill myself, which we've heard a lot of people talk about. It turns out that the last statistic I read is that 92% of alcoholic suicides are committed sober, right? We do that in that beautiful state that my new brother from another mother talked about, right, called untreated alcoholism, where I can't go one more day sober and I know that I can't take so much as one more drink. That happened to me at 36 days. I hated AA. I hated the people in my area. I read something and I remember it. I should say that. I learned that in step 6 and 7. I didn't do anything to acquire that, so it's really nothing to be proud of, right? I didn't go to like remembering school and work really hard and practice remembering so that I could be that really annoying guy in your home group and go, that's on page 86, halfway down, third paragraph, right? And, And my guess is, we were talking about, there's probably a lot of groups of AA all across the United States and the world that are really glad we're here this weekend, right? They're like, finally, a meeting where nobody's talking about steps and books and, whoo, we got them all in one room out there in Vegas. Just keep them there. But I'm that guy, I could just throw stuff out. Because of that, I do very well in school without working. I don't learn any of the lessons we're supposed to learn in school about forming, bonds, working together towards a common goal or solution, interpersonal relationships, none of that, right? By my senior year, to tell you what my life looks like, there's 4 other guys on the soccer team that are on scholarship. They're from about 29 miles south of the University of San Diego, which is in Linda Vista, California. And those guys all have, it seemed to me, they had 50 cousins. They were Mexican guys and had 50 cousins apiece beneath the border. And I figured out how to get some stuff from these cousins to bring across the border that all the rich kids like smoking. And being from the East Coast, I didn't want to leave those people out, so I'm packaging things and sending them back. There's federal rules and stuff that Mike could probably tell you about. And I'm just really drinking and trying to fit in and be somebody is the truth of it in Southern California, And I had no big aspirations of being a big drug dealer or something like that, and that wasn't what was happening. But I know that my drinking is increasing more and more and more to be able to tolerate what I'm doing while I'm going to these Jesuit classes. I'm playing Division I soccer. There's a lot of separation. We've heard about Chamberlain. He says that there's only one problem, right, that encompasses all problems, conscious separation, and only one solution, this conscious connection or conscious contact. I had no idea how separated I was. Our book says that the alcoholic often lives a double life, and if I'd have only had two going on, that would have been a good deal. But by the time, what's going on in my life at that point, if any two people that loved or cared about me or had anything to do with my life were in the same room at the same time, there was going to be, the gig would be up. Because I had different stories going down. If my mom talked to my sister, trouble, right? If they talked to the registrar's office, trouble, different stories. If the registrar's office talked to my soccer coach, trouble. If my girlfriend talked to my other girlfriend, big trouble. Right? It takes a lot of energy and remembering who did I say what to. By my senior year, I had purchased my first home in a town called La Jolla, California, which is one of the best surf spots by Wind and Sea Beach. I don't surf anymore because I drink. And when you drink like I drink, everything must go. It's the third house on the right, 423 Nautilus Street. I'm driving a silver BMW with a number on the back that lets you know I'm very, very important. They don't even sell this car in the United States. I had to have it shipped here from Europe because I'm that important. I'm dating the prettiest girl at that school. That's what you all thought, so I dated her. I still have no idea if I liked her. And that's how I'm living my life. And boom, 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 every single door and window come in. I'm on my stomach. The plastic zip ties go on, and off I go to the federal penitentiary for the first time. I'd never been in a federal prison. I told you I'm a jail guy. That kind of got my attention. My mom's a retired first grade teacher. She could tell you exactly how many kids she's taught to read. Her whole life has been about serving others and making the world a better place. And as Sharon would say, she's surely been a part of the force for good in this world. I love my mom. She's one of my heroes. And but the other thing about elementary school teachers, if there's any of you in here, you can vouch for me. They laminate everything, right? If it's on the they laminate it, right? So she cut this article out of the Union Tribune in Los Angeles. It said like Jesuit student, 27 kilos of cocaine, and moms are good like that. They save those things for you, and proud moments in a mom's life, right? And I'm in there a little over 9.5 months, and it turned out the DEA had some problems of honesty of their own on an affidavit for a search warrant, and it was determined to be an illegal search, and that didn't leave them with much, and I'm sure they figured, like, we'll get him next time, because, that's how prosecutors think, right? We'll get him next time. They're cynical bastards, if you didn't pick that up, right? They're sharp, concise, precise, and I start bouncing around the country, one step ahead of the next warrant. Anybody that's been in a penitentiary knows what you are. If you're alcoholic, the day you get out, right, you're thirsty. And I can't go home. My family's done with me. The more you love me, the more I use you up, man. God bless you. The people that love me the most, I will suck you dry. I will take everything from you. And I'm just bouncing around, man, and I can't go home and I can't stay still. There's people looking for me. It seems like there's so much water, right, that's gone under the dam or over the dam or however you say that there's no coming back, right? And I'm coming up on 29 years old, and it's like a life that almost got started, right? Almost a college graduate. I was almost a really good soccer player. I was almost a really good academic. I was almost a good big brother, almost a decent son. Almost a lot of things, but now I'm bouncing around, and I'm in a town called Sun Valley, Idaho, and Ketchum is the name of the town, and I go from there to Steamboat, and Steamboat to Boulder, and Boulder to Jackson, Wyoming. At the end of I remember Jackson, Wyoming. If we got any Wyoming people, they got a bar there called the $1 Million Cowboy Bar. And we got some clapping. We got rodeo here this week, so somebody ought to know about it. And the great thing about the $1 Million Cowboy Bar is that the bar stools are saddles on a pole. And, when you get into those things, right, there's a feeling, you are in for the night, buddy. And there's you want to talk about ease and comfort. As soon as I got in the saddle, And what do you win? Looks at me, and I got a little pile of money in front of me just so you could, see. And I start buying you a few drinks with money that's either not mine or certainly not legally earned. And you look at me and go, "What's your story, cowboy?" And I go, "Well, babe, I'm traveling, just traveling." Like I'm like a romantic sojourner across our great nation, right? You want to talk about delusional. I'm like one step ahead of a warrant from the last town, right? And in my mind, I'm like traveling, just traveling. And I wind up and get sober. We're all big shot wannabe drug dealers wind up when the federal government takes everything you have, every bank account, car, house, you name it, they took it. And that's on Mom's couch. It's a great place to get sober at Mom's couch. There's only one rule, right? You can stay here as long as you want, as long as... a lot of Mom's couch people. And you all rat it yourself out pretty quick. And I start coming to AA at 36 days sober. I no steps, no sponsor. I mean, the max formula of recovery, right? And we all heard how well that worked, right? And I could second that motion, right? Same thing, no sponsor. No, I mean, I can look at those, and I mean, what a bad idea for somebody in my line of work. A written you know what that's called? My line of work, a paper trail. I mean, the IRS is looking for me. I have warrants in 3 states. Like that's how I walked into AA. And you guys are saying things that impressed me from the beginning, like that you say very pridefully, right? I have a driver's license, a registration card, and insurance, all in the same name in the same state. And I would hit Roger, man, with my arm, and I'm like, "Did you hear that? Did you hear that? He's got the trifecta." And I mean, that's seriously how I felt about it, because I had several driver's licenses, none with my real name, and all different states, right? And back when you could pull that off. But that was so impressive to me that somebody could live their life having those 3 documents in order at the same time. I mean, I had no idea how you could pull that off. And I take all these, my liver was biopsied at 29. That should have been a hint. Wasn't, but it should have been. It's Johns Hopkins we have in Baltimore. What do they know? And I take most of my advice from bartenders and drug dealers who know things. These guys at Johns Hopkins. And at 36 days, I'm not supposed to take any Tylenol because it'll shut down the liver, and I do that, and it almost kills me. I wind up in a hospital. The dying didn't work, obviously. But it does help you get to that place where we all have to get, called the bottom, and I think there's only one bottom in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we all spend a lot of time talking about the other details because we like it, our egos like it. The bottom is sort of like the Christmas tree. They're all the same. And all of our stories are like the little ornaments and things we hang on it. But everybody sitting here got to a place where we could not imagine life with or without alcohol. And whatever details it took to get you there, rock on with your bad self, right? And for me, this is it. And there's this girl named Janine who's at every AA meeting. She's got this stupid big book with her. She's got like 16, 18 years sober. So I'm thinking, like, haven't you read it yet? What's wrong with you? Are you a little bit slow? We got some slow learners. And I mean, I read it once and I can tell you what page everything's on. And you're like carrying it around. And she doesn't call her sponsees. She doesn't call them pigeons like the old timers. She calls them duckies, right? Isn't that cute? And it was like enough to make me vomit. And I wake up at the hospital, and I don't die, and I'm hooked up, and I'm in a gown. You know who's at the end of the bed, and it's Janine, right? And I'm like, oh, God. And she's got the duckies with her, and I didn't know if there's like a place called Alcoholic Hell or not, but if there was, I was in it. Janine doesn't talk to me that day because she tried to talk to me like hundreds of times. She did talk to the duckies, and she said, "Girls, I want you to take a good look. This is what happens to an alcoholic that refuses to take our steps. Let's go, girls." And when Raj got me into the book, man, and I read Bill's story, I got to tell you, I learned a new word from you folks, resentful. At Bill, I mean, he's in a hospital. He got a white light and a cool breeze, and I got Janine and the duckies. I'm like, this is crap, right? But it turns out that it was every bit as important, because the next thought that came through my head, I've never had one like it before. I've never had one since. And that was that if I get out of here alive, I'm going to find one of those old guys with that book in their hand and that smile on their face, and I'm going to do everything they tell me to do. And I don't do anything everyone Anybody tells me to do. And we got up to step 8 and 9. I did all that other stuff with him, and he looked at me and he said, that was really good, but it's completely useless. All you are up till steps 8 and 9 is a self-informed jerk. Used a different word, but we're at Stateline. I read the sheet. And that's all you are. Good. You made some peace with the God of your understanding in steps 1 through 3. Good for you. Nobody cares. Oh, you've written an inventory. You could point out some of, these. Good for you. Nobody cares. Oh, steps 6 and 7. You're familiar with your shortcomings. You did good for you. Oh, and you've got a list. 8. We made it when we took inventory. Tell a story about that really quick. I live at the beach, and I would hear things, right, in the meetings. And in my area, the thing to do, right, that people love sharing about is doing their fifth step at the beach, and I read it, and we lit it on fire, and we threw it into the ocean, and like my past. I mean, it was a beautiful story. I heard it a lot. It was like a Viking funeral or something, right? And he wants to do it like at his dining room table. I'm like, is that lame or what? Like, we got to go to the beach. We light it on fire. Haven't you heard everybody? And like, how are you sober 30 years and don't know what to do? And he's like, we don't light it on fire. Look at this. It says we have a list. We made it when we took inventory. How are you going to do the rest of the steps if you light it on fire and throw it in the ocean? He's like, would you please stop going to those BB meetings? And I'm like, what's BB meeting? And he goes, I don't know, but it's not AA. And he did something in my area that was helpful to me. He took a meeting list and started to highlight. He said, these are the groups I'm familiar with that practice the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had no idea that not every group does that, but that was a good starting point. It's good to have a sponsor to just kind of steer you where there's some recovery. And he looked at me and said, well, I haven't worked with a whole lot of guys like you. You've pretty much ruined your whole life and every relationship in it. You've screwed it all up. You've screwed it all up. But this is your chance. You could do AA right. This could be the one thing in your life that you do the right way. How free do you want to be? How free do you want to be? We've got everything in here, man, from ground beef to filet mignon. What do you want to settle for? And I don't know your experience, but I can find somebody in AA to tell me how to get away with a half measure of just about anything. He said, if I was you, I'd start dating that mother of yours. I'd go wherever she'll go. She hadn't looked me in the eyes for over 10 years, man. She loved me, but she just couldn't look at me. And I start dating mom, and I'm dating mom, and I'm dating mom, and I'm like 30 years old, and I'm unemployable. If you looked at my NCIC, I have 36 arrests. Nobody would be impressed. It should just say like drunk and stupid at the top. It definitely would not say like badass, and you'd be like, there's a real tough guy. It's all like drunk in public. We have a thing like failure to obey the lawful command of a police officer. I was not good at that. Just drunk, stupid stuff, right? And then this one federal thing that was kind of a big deal. I concede on that, Mike. I wasn't allowed at my mom's house. She had a restraining order at the end of our relationship, and she starts going to lunch. The only place that would hire me, I applied for, my sponsor calls them a job. Just get a job, right? And that means mopping floors at Walmart, McDonald's, janitor stuff at the Home Depot, somewhere. Nobody will hire me. Those places are all corporate and do a background check. None of them would hire me. But a sober member of AA did. He owned a hand-carved, he carved picture frames, wooden picture frames, and paid me $6.25 an hour, man, and somehow a little became a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know if anybody's had that experience. See, when I was hanging with you folks and starting to take these actions, a little became a lot because what I was doing was starting to focus on the spiritual rather than the material. And when I focus on the spiritual, the material always takes care of itself, and it's never the other way around. Wish somebody had filled me in on that when I was about 12. Right? And at the end of the week, I'm sweeping in this picture frame shop, and he's playing these CDs of many of the people that are sitting in this room. It was one of those boom boxes that had the CD and the tape, and depending on who we were listening to, we would alternate. And I had my fair. I was being a surfer, man. I would, let's listen to Cliff again. And he's like, we've listened to Cliff Roach like 6 times yesterday. And I'm like, one more, right? And I'm sweep, and $6.25, and I got a little money at the end of the way. I always got $1 for your basket. Always got money to take mom to dinner. I have no idea how that happens. And it did. And after a whole lot of dates and a whole lot of time, we're sitting at Carrabba's, and she's swirling spaghetti on a spoon. And I don't know why she does that, but she does. And she twists it around and then eats it. And she was doing that, and she looked up at me. And we were talking, eyeball to eyeball, mother to son. And she started having me over to the house as she was getting up in age to take out her trash and to change the light in the kitchen because she couldn't stand on a chair anymore. And I started to be allowed in that house that I wasn't used to be allowed in. And my words started to change because you told me that words are powerful in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't have to take out the trash. I got to take out the trash, right? I got to go to my mom's house. I got to be a son. And that relationship's gotten better and better and better. And she's one of my best friends to this day. If she was giving you this talk, she would throw in the plug that one of her favorite things that my wife and I decided to do was to buy a house about 1.5 miles away from her, so that as those light bulbs and that trash needs to go out and she gets up in her age, that she doesn't have to worry about if her son's nearby and who's looking out for her. We also built a guest room. I got married at 10-ish years sober, and we now have a 5 and a 2-year-old, Isabella and Sophia, and an in-law room for my mom with her own shower, and it's on the first floor, and she's in and out of my house 2-3 times a day, checking on her grandbabies, living the life. She sits out on the beach in front, and it's like a throne. It's a Tommy Bahama beach chair, but it might as well be a throne, and she watches, her kids and her grandkids play in the sand. And there's another piece of spiritual literature that says, may you see your children's children, and it's like a joy that Alcoholics Anonymous has afforded my mother as the result of these steps. And years went into that relationship, and we were sitting there one day, and I had built the relationship. And when I talked to my mom, she wasn't interested in the money, the thousands of dollars that I stole a little bit at a time, and this and that. She wanted to know where I was and who I was with and what my life looked like. And my mom is maybe like 10 pounds more overweight than I am, like not. And when we got to the place, because as these amends have gone over the years, what I do is the week, but most of my family's usually off between Christmas and New Year's, and we get together now, thank God. And one at a time, at a different time, I allowed them to take my inventory. We go sit down, and I go, how'd I do this year? What kind of son am I? What kind of brother am I? What kind of husband have I been? And I let them each weigh in and take, because at this point in my life, their inventory is far more important than mine. I mean, does it really matter what kind of brother I think I'm being if she's unhappy, right? And we're doing that, and my mom started crying, and she said, I need to ask you something. Ever since about 8th grade, you never came home on the weekends. You spent the night out at your friends' houses. You were never here. I never met any of your girlfriends. I never knew any of your friends. When you came home from college, you never really stayed here. And she was weeping, and she looked at me and she said, are you ashamed of me? Is that why you didn't want anyone to meet me? Are you ashamed of me because I'm overweight? And she had her head down and started crying. I've never been ashamed of my mother. She's one of the most amazing women in the world. And I got to look her in the eye and say, no, Mom, you and Dad were good parents. You had a rule we weren't allowed to bring alcohol in the house. I had other friends that as long as we spent the night, we were allowed to drink there. I went to where I was allowed to drink. This has nothing to do with you. This has nothing to do with your weight. And I couldn't love you more and be more proud of you. And then we had to take an action behind that conversation, because it was clear to me what she really wanted was to know who my friends were and what I did. And she's become the kind of the home group den mom. It's like an unofficial home group AA, because it's not GSO approved, right? But she gets to bring cookies, right? She hangs out, knows everybody, high fives all of you before the meeting. Then when the meeting starts, she kind of splits and comes to all the anniversaries, and she knows all of you. And she knows who her friends are, and then we sit down, and when I met the woman that I thought was right, I sat down and had a conversation, and I said, hey, Mom, I'm thinking of asking Lauren to marry me. What do you think? And you know what moms like doing more than anything? Being moms, weighing in, being a part of their sons' lives. And I could go on, but I got a lot of other things to talk to about in a little bit of time. And but for all the tough guy gangsters, want to be tatted up, better. Turns out that all I ever wanted was to be a man, to be respected, right? You respect me, I'm a man. And it turns out that it's really hard to be a man until you first learn how to be a son. And it's made me a heck of a husband learning how to become a son. And that little sister I had talked to for a long, long time, over 6.5 years, I had a set of Baltimore Ravens season tickets. And Roger said, you send those tickets to your sister. You don't even like the NFL now that you're sober. What you liked about going to those games was having the biggest tailgate, a prime rib, slicing at the biggest bar in the parking lot, being a big shot. By the time the game started, you were so drunk, you don't even know who won. And that was the truth of it. And I said, well, these tickets are expensive. She hadn't talked to me in 6.5 years. That would be stupid, to send these. And he said, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, send them to your sister. And I did, and nothing happened. And I said, see, told you nothing happened. He said, send the next set. I was like, you're not listening. Nothing happened. And I sent the next set of tickets, and the phone rang. And on the other end of that phone was a little girl's voice that said, Richie, did you see that? The Ravens just caught the ball. They're in the end zone. They tied it up. And it was that little voice man that I hadn't heard in over 6.5 years. And I could tell you that I could care less who the Ravens were playing. I still don't know. But I was talking to my little sister boy for the first time in about 6.5 years. And I kept sending those tickets, and those phone calls kept coming, and we developed a little relationship around football. On the weekends, I would drive 3 hours to Baltimore. She bought her first little place, and I would help her paint the walls and set it up. And I was making that little $6.25 an hour job. And I had another little problem. I had this deal with the IRS where I never asked anything from them, and I didn't figure that they should ask anything from me. It was like, fair. And Roger had me go 3 hours, to sit down, make an appointment with the IRS, and I turned myself in. I thought I was like going to jail. He says, no, the IRS doesn't really like to lock people up. They just want their money. They don't, it's no good to kill the goose that lays the golden egg, was your phrase. He's like, they just want their money. And we made this payment deal, and I think I was supposed to pay something like $30-some a week to the IRS, and I owed $43,000. And I have no idea how you pay $43,000. I mean, I was going to pay, right, $43,000. I don't know if I was going to, my plan, when I had an extra $43,000, right, I was going to just take it to the IRS and give it to them. But it turns out that I never come across an extra $43,000 that I don't have some use for. But when the letters stopped, I mean, you want to talk about harassment, right? Boy, does the IRS, they probably sent me $43,000 in letters. They blow you up, right, when they want that money, and phone call, IRS. You know when that stuff stops? Not when I paid that last check for $43,000, right? It stopped. They stopped all of that with that first payment of $30-some and that payment plan went. And I got free, not on the last, but from the first. But we did go do that last one about 4 years later, and he had the pacemaker by that point, and you guys could see him. We're not exactly looking at Michael Jordan here, but we're at the center of town, and there's this post office, and this little guy with a pacemaker, he says, put it in and say it to the IRS. Say it out loud, and there's people in there, right? And he's like, say it. And I'm like, my amends to the IRS is complete. And people are looking at it. He jumps up over that mailbox, and I'm over there. We do this high five. And then the next year I got this letter from the IRS that it was like a big check in it. And I start crying, and I drive up to his house, and I'm like, I'm in big trouble. I don't know what I screwed up, but I'm in it again. Look at this, and what do we do? And he looks at it, and he goes, that's a tax refund check, you idiot. Normal people get those every year. So I've been doing that every year, whether I don't have to agree with the portion they take or the numbers or how the process works. I just have to do it. And then they get this check back and, whatever. So that's been that, and hanging with the sister, hanging with the mom, and this guy calls me and says, hey, Rich, this is Justin. I know your father's no longer a part of your lives, but you've become the number one man in your little sister's life. I'm calling to ask you if I could have her hand in marriage. And you're darn right, all. You know why? Because there's nobody less qualified to give away the hand of a beautiful little girl than the drunk standing before you. And I got to do that, and she called and asked if I'd walk her down the aisle, and I got to do that, and that was a spectacular day. She's gone on to have 2 sons, Sadler and Brixton. They're 6 and 5. And they like to come on vacation to the beach, man, and hang with Uncle Rich. And my mom sits in that Tommy Bahama beach chair one more time. And now what she's gazing over, her kingdom, has gotten bigger because it's her son and her daughter talking, friends, and all 4 grandkids playing together and building sandcastles. And that's a heck of a thing for a grandmom to watch. And some things have changed over the years that you're going to hear about, but while we're talking about that, I'm able to give, and I'm proud of this. Hopefully this doesn't come across egoic, and it comes across from the place. My credit score was whatever number they give you for having like a social security number when I got here. It was like 120, right? And it turns out, this is my newcomer financial talk, right? When those bills come in, if instead of throwing them away, you pay them, your credit score goes up. Everybody got that? That's it. The bills come in, pay them, credit score up. And it happens like 100% guarantee that will happen. And that has happened. And when you go to work every day and work at work and do the things we've heard talked about, the jobs keep coming and getting better and better. And when we approach those jobs with how can I help and how can I be of service, and a job isn't something I'm punching the clock, but a place where I'm doing good, and see that AA principle of separation and all that kind of stuff goes away, and there's not different lives anymore. There's not, oh, well, that's my marital life. Oh, that's my AA life. Oh, that's my work life. Because we all know that the principles are, very different in these different areas. In AA, you got to be 100% honest, but at work, you got to screw them a little to make the deal, right? Like, once all that started to go away through this process and things smoothed out, things got better and better. I'm giving the best Christmas gift to my family this year that I've ever gotten to give. And I'm proud of it from a humble place, not that I'm bragging, because it's the gift of togetherness. At 3 o'clock on Christmas Day, after we all open gifts together, we're going to the Baltimore airport, and we're getting on a plane to Siesta Key, and I got 3 little cabins, one for my mom, one for my sister's family and grandkids, and one for my wife and kids. And we're going to all have a week's vacation and ring in the new year together because, see, Alcoholics Anonymous, in the foreword of the 2nd edition, it says why it works. It says AA is growing by leaps and bounds primarily for 2 reasons: the large number of recoveries and families reunited. And that's what you've done for me. And my oldest friend in the world is a guy named Ethan. And I didn't show up at Ethan's wedding. His father sent me a plane ticket. I was living in La Jolla, taking over the world, one drug deal at a time. And he sent me a plane ticket, had me fit it, and bought me a tuxedo. Ethan asked me to be the best man in his wedding, and I was so excited to do that I started drinking the night before that flight. And I don't need to know, you guys know what happened. I didn't get on the plane, and when I don't get on a plane and I don't show up to be your best man, you go on a secret list that I keep deep down in my guts where I can't take your phone call. I can't look at you, I can't face you, and you go on. It's why alcoholics have caller ID, right? I will tell you right now, there's a lot of people that call me, people laugh at me, they kind of joke me, but you all know how I answer the phone when you call me, because there's a lot of you here that do. I go, hello, Rich Bruckner. And if you can't do that, and you got to look before you pick up the phone and go, hello, Rich Bruckner, you're not done. It's a great indicator. You're still living in bondage of self. That means there's somebody I can't talk to for some reason. And whenever Ethan's number would pop up, I knew, and I couldn't take that phone call. I knew why he was calling. He was calling to tell me, you ruined my wedding. You're a no-good drunk. I got these kids. You're a bum. And as the years went by, I'd heard his wife was lovely. I heard he had a child and another child. And it just got worse and worse, because that stuff bothers us sober. When I'm drinking, I can bury that. And every time I would look up, he said, it's time to go see Ethan. I called and I asked if I could have 15 minutes with him and his dad. And I explained that this was a life or death errand. I know you hate me. I know I screwed up the wedding. I know I'm a lousy friend. Can I please have 15 minutes? Maybe your dad could be there. And he said, yeah, you could be here 8 o'clock Saturday morning if you can make it. And that was like a decade later. So I think he had one of those resentment things. And I saved up my $6.25 and I showed up. And I had some money in my pocket, and I saw his parents' car in the driveway, and I knocked on the door, and Ethan opened the door, And his wife was standing by a kitchen island with the little girl next to her holding her hand. And his mom and dad were in the back in the kitchen, and what I didn't see was a little boy that came running at me from some back room, and he just came trucking at me like a little guy, and he grabbed a hold of my leg like a tree trunk, man. He was hugging it so tight, and he looked up at me, and he said, "You're my Uncle Rich? You're my Uncle Rich? Daddy said one day I'd meet you." Because, see, he had been telling those kids what a no-good bum I was, what a drunk POS I was. None of that. He'd been telling them they had an Uncle Rich. With that kid holding on to my leg, man, and saying those words to me, let me tell you the experience I had. See, because you all have never taught me anything. You've never convinced me of anything. What you've done is encouraged me to do what you've done and see what happens, right? This is a spiritual experiment. And boy, do I invite you to try it, man. We just go through this and see what happens for you. And what happened for me on that day was that kid holding on to my legs, those blinders, I realized I had an inner knowing, right? I had an inner knowing that I'm what separates me from you. I'm the one that missed nearly 3 years of their lives by my stupid, egoic inability to look at you and go, I was wrong. Boy, did I screw this up. How can I fix it? I was wrong. How can I fix it? And as we all know, the problem with that is when I'm separate from you, I'm separate from God. And I sat down with his with his father in that living room in the back after I talked with Ethan and his wife and visited with those kids. And I got to tell you, it's gone on and on with the kids. They live 3 hours away. And then when it snows, I drove the 3 hours to take them sleigh riding. Birthdays, I showed up with a little gift. Christmas Eve, we would do my family, and then we'd swing by their house with some Christmas gifts. And those little kids look at me and say, Uncle Rich, you show up on all the good days, right? Like it's an accident, 6-hour round trip. But that's what AA lets me do, is show up on all the good days, right? And when I sit down with his dad, I said, I know that I owe you some money. There was the tuxedo and the plane ticket. I don't know if you remember all that for your son's wedding. And he said, I remember that. It's $1,372. And I had it. I reached in my pocket from my little job, and I'd been saving it up. And he said, no, you're not going to pay me. If that's true, if you're really a part of a home group, if you're really in this thing, Ralph, if you're all in, what you're going to do is no more than $10 at a time. You're going to take some fancy donuts every now and then to your home group. You're going to treat them good. Maybe some fancy coffee, kick it up a notch, sneak them a little Starbucks here and there, right? Put some gas in a newcomer's car. Don't give them the money. Put the gas in the car. And you save the receipt, and none of them can be for more than $10. And when you've got $1,372, you're going to drive back here 3 hours, and you're going to give it to me on that day. And on that day, your amends to me will be complete. I didn't see that coming. He followed that up with... by the way, I'm 28 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been praying for the two of you since you've been that big. And that was the night that the primary purpose group of Ocean City became an eating meeting. We had Stouffer's lasagnas. They're $9.95, in case anybody's wondering. And let me tell you what else that man taught me. In making my amends to him, right? My amends to him. I don't know if anybody's ever cooked a Stouffer's lasagna. They come from the frozen foods thing. You put it in the oven. You preheat the oven to 375 degrees. They go in for an hour and 20 minutes. The last 10 to 15 minutes, you take that foil off. It lets the cheese crust up. Then you get it out, and they're scalding hot, and you cover that up, and you get some paper plates and some knives and forks and some napkins. And then you carry that with 2 pot holders out to the trunk of your car, and you put it in there. And it's a crappy car. It's a Subaru. Doors are dented. I sometimes wonder if it's going to start. And I drive to my home group, but I was thinking of y'all 2 hours before I was with you. And I put that lasagna on that table. And what he taught me was to think and care about you, and that AA starts before I even get to AA. And it's my actions before and after the meeting. They put me all in, baby. And you guys have taught me that by showing me that. And the last thing I had, was I had an old warrant out in California, and I'm about 2 years sober at this point, and I didn't want to do that, and I know enough about the book to show Roger. I'm like, it says right here, we don't do these acts of heroics. You know, we turn ourselves in. I'd be useless to my mom. She needs me, right? The light bulbs, the trash. You guys threw in the complimentary AA girlfriend that you do, right, at like year 1 or 2. It never works out, but you think it's God's will. And so I had that going on. It's not the woman that turned out to be my wife. It's the, you know, that first relationship that's, and I would tell him, you know, that she's God's will, and he would say things like, she's 16 years sober, she was doing much better before you came along, and she doesn't need you. Sponsors see things different, by the way. That's why it's important to have them. They see everything. Their perception is very skewed. And I'm trying to explain to him why this is a horrible time to go to prison for 5 years. Because what it was I had a DUI with some outside issues in my pocket. And I went in front of a judge who did what all judges do to me. They put me on in California. I think they still have it. It's called the PC 1000 First Time Felony Offenders Program. And this was a state thing. It's not. I had like an 8-ball. I mean, it wasn't a lot. And he said, I'm giving you 5 years. But if you do these like 3 things, like go to 10 AA meetings, do the pee clean, it'll be as if this never happened. 10 AA meetings, what an order. I can't go through with it, right? And so I screw it up, right? And when I screw up probation, I run away because that's what I do. I'm a coward. I'm a runner. The tough guys in AA, man, the tough guys, talk to them on steps 8 and 9. They walk through the fire, man, head up and shoulders back and take it like a man. I'm a runner. I want you to think I'm a man, but I'm not. And he said, this is a great time to do that, 5 years. How free do you want to be? What are you going to tell your kids when they want to go to Disneyland? You know, Disney World's much better than Disneyland. It's a big state. You love surfing. You surf all the time. I surf almost 300 days a year to this day, right? What are you going to do? Never go to California? Make up a story? So a bunch of the guys I sponsor and Raj, you know, start cheering you on because, yeah, it's good to be in the middle of the train, right? You got those guys out in front. Most of you are here in my world, and I thank you for it, leading the way. All I got to do is lock in the middle of that train and then sponsor a couple of these new guys, get them hooked up behind me. And guess what? When you see a train crash on the news, it's never the center cars that come off the track. Never, right? The caboose sometimes, things get wild. That last car, you know, detaches, right? But those ones in the center. So the guys in back of me are saying things like, you got to do it, Spons. It's your 9th step. You can do it, man. And like when your sponsees are saying stuff and like, you know, you can't be looking bad, right? In front of you, in front of your sponsees, like, boy, did I get that part of the talk. And I'm like, all right. And he starts confiscating my little paychecks. And off I go and I end up standing in front of the judge. And it took a little while for that to happen. Nothing in AA happens as fast as it sounds like it does in a 1-hour talk. If you're new, hang in with us. It's the only problem. It's not as fast as the booze, but it's much more permanent and much better in the long haul. And what I didn't know is when I stood in front of that judge and I had sweat circles under my arms and I'd been in and out of the bathroom a couple times, like waiting for court to start at 9 o'clock. It was not sexy. This stuff about faith and fear cannot be in the same place at the same time. I don't know what that even means. I was scared to death and I had like the faith from you guys that we were going to somehow get through this, but boy was I scared. And what I didn't know was about 40 some of you took the time to write that judge letters about my life and how many meetings I'd been to and people I was helping and floors I was mopping. And the judge said, I've never seen anything like this. You've exceeded the terms of the probation, not the way I told you to, but you've exceeded it. This case is dismissed. And he hit that hammer down and he finished that by saying, I'd go back to Maryland and do whatever those people in AA tell you. And I stepped out of that courtroom and I will tell you that I've been in 36 courtrooms. I've never walked out. I always get a weekend sentence, 30 days, 60 days, something stupid, right? And which, by the way, I think I'm winning when that happens, just so you know what you're dealing with, right? I'm like, they dismissed the possession with intent to distribute. It's just a simple possession. I only got 6 months, man. We beat it, right? And then I violate probation and go back for 90 days and come out and he pointed out to me, he's like, you do realize what you're really doing is serving a life sentence. You're just doing it on the installment program, right? And I'm like, whoa, right? Good to know that. So I step out. I'm like, I'm coming home, Raj. I'm coming home. Tell the guys we could still have the big book study on Wednesdays in my living room. We could still have it. And he goes, well, wait a second. You flew out there on a one-way ticket. You got to get a ticket for tomorrow. Why don't you go over to that Jesuit college? Remember the Jesuits, the newspaper articles there? And straighten that out while you're there. And I'm thinking like, man, can we have a moment to breathe? Did you get this? I'm not going to prison for 5 years, right? I'm coming home. Right? But this thing talks about action and more action, and sponsors are like that, right? They don't ever really say, let's take a moment and relax and celebrate, right? So I go over to the University of San Diego. It's the same dean that kicked me out. Imagine that. Coincidence. And I make my amend, and I tell her that I know what I did, that the Jesuits stand for building men and women of integrity. I learned that through Alcoholics Anonymous and the spiritual seeking you all encouraged me to do in here. And I know a little bit about what the Jesuits do and don't do, and I didn't stand for any of it. And I have no idea how to make this right, but I'll do whatever you tell me to. And that dean said, if that's true, you're going to come with me, and walk me to a building next door that I'd never been in, put down a big stack of papers and said, this is an application to our law school. We really like to graduate students. We don't like to kick them out. You know what makes us look good? Graduating students that go on to do great things and participate in our alumni association. And yes, they hit me up for checks now too, but that's... I stepped outside, I called Roger, I said, Dean's lost her mind, she wants me to fill out this application, go to law school, I came here to make amends, this is what she's telling me to do, I'm a federal felon, I got all these 36 arrests, even if I make it through law school, which I won't, they're not going to let me sit for the bar. If I do pass the bar, which I won't pass the bar, I have no idea how to pass a bar exam, but if I did, I'd have to go in front of an ethics committee. Even if I went through all that and passed that and got in front of the ethics committee, they'd never license me to practice. He said, shut up. Did you just tell that lady you do whatever she said to make it right? And I said, yes, I did. And he said, then shut up and fill out the application. 3 years later, I graduated second from the top of my class. Not because, you know what I did? I did it the AA way. You show up 15 minutes for every class. You shake every teacher's hand just like you do the new person. You ask a question, whether you have one or not. You know what that does? It builds a relationship. You stay after class, just like we do after the meetings. You know what it turns out? That's an amazing formula for life. I can't tell you what showing up early and staying late's done in my career, my relationships, all kinds of organizations I'm a part of now. And I got back, and the ninth step, and I got to tell this really quick. It's our chance, man. This is our chance to clean up the wreckage of our past, or it will clean us up. It's one way or the other. That's the way a spiritual principle works. And I came back and I was all excited, and I got this job, and I was hired as a judicial law clerk for 2 circuit court judges, man, where you write the judge's opinion. I mean, it is the best job you could get out of law school, because when you're done doing that, you go to work for any firm anywhere. And I told my family, my sponsor, my home group, I mean, you want to talk about what God has done? Like, geez Louise, I've made it through the bar, and I'm hired as a judicial law clerk. And they sent the paperwork in because it's a state job. And about a week after I had the job and told everyone in the world, of course, I get a phone call, the judges need to see you in chambers, and I go back in, and they said, Rich, you have 3 felony warrants out of the state of Colorado. We can't hire you. You're a fugitive. And I didn't know. And they weren't on anything. They weren't on that end. We didn't know. And I said, guys, your honors, could I have a chance to figure out what these are? They hire you about 6 months ahead of time for that job, because you have to replace the old. I said, if I could get this straightened out by the time I start, could I still have this job? And they looked at each other and said, well, we just hired a guy with 36 arrests. What's one more? And I couldn't believe it. And we flew out to Colorado, and it turns out that I had a boss that I worked for in Colorado that wasn't paying me what I thought I was worth. I don't know if anybody's had that. And I would supplement what I should really be making based on, And it turns out that that's called felony check fraud, when you take a check from some business's operating account and write it to supplement your income. And I fly out there, and I'm making my amends to the guy, and we're talking about it, and I have his money, and of course, I pay the money back and all of that. And I'm telling him what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I'm in this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm on the 9th step, and the guy starts crying. He was a lawyer, and I can't tell you his name because I don't know if he'll make it to us or what's going on, but he starts crying, and he says, you know how many times I've been to Alcoholics Anonymous? I've never made it past step 3. And I spent the next 2 days in Colorado talking about AA and going to some meetings, and I'd love to tell you how it ends. I don't know. I know he got rid of the warrants. I hope he's sober, but I don't know. And I came back, and in the meantime, my phone rang, and on the other end of the phone was a guy's voice. I knew who it was. He says, "This is the state's attorney." I thought I was in trouble again. And state's attorney for the state of Maryland, I got a patch through the governor's office. We just got a large grant. I want to hire an assistant state's attorney to head up our gang and narcotics unit. We were given your phone number that you might know something about the importation of narcotics into our country. And your reaction was much like mine. But you know what I remembered? I remember the old guys, man, in AA that came long before me, and the smile on their face and that book in their hand. And they always told me, they said, "Kid, one day your sordid past will become your greatest asset." And I took that job, and it was hard because judges are tricky bastards, and they would say things like, "Would the defendant please rise?" I'd stand up, and the judge would go like, "No, you're the prosecutor." You know, it took a little while to get used to that. And I served the state of Maryland in that capacity for 10 years. I got to help put in some drug courts and alternative sentencing things. And I know beyond everything in my being knows when I stood at that table and I looked over at the defense table that I had a unique perspective that was given to me. Where some people might see a burglar breaking into a liquor store at 3 o'clock in the morning, but when I keep reading, you know what he stole? A 6-pack of natural light beer. Sounds an awful lot like the morning terror and madness we're on, and I would steal from my wife's slender purse, and I came up with some very creative sentences over that 10 years, and I believe that God had me just where he wanted me. And over the last 2.5 years, some interesting things. There's a Langston Hughes poem that drives me. It's called A Dream Deferred, where the chorus to that poem is the boogie-woogie rumble of a dream deferred. Does it fester? Does it breed? The boogie-woogie rumble of a dream deferred. And there's some people sitting here today that have some unfinished, I don't know what. And when Bill Wilson did his 5th step with Father Ed Dowling, he does that confessional part. Here's what I did, and I did this, and I was embarrassed, and I was naked in the middle of town. And Father Ed Dowling looks at him and goes, "You know, Bill, it's not so much the things that men have done that keep them drunk. It's the things they've left undone." And boy, did that make sense to me. And I took the biggest risk. We put in a letter of resignation to follow a dream. I've always wanted to own my own law firm and make a run at it and see if we could make a difference in the world. And I'm here to tell you 2.5 years later, I just did my QuickBooks. We're coming up on January. I had to send everything to the accountant. I believe that we are the largest by nearly double DUI defense firm. On the eastern shore of Maryland, I did 317 of our people last year. And now God puts you across my desk 317 times last year, where I get to talk to you about your drinking. And I can't help but notice that this is your 3rd DUI. Do you think this is an accident still? Is this one the police officer's fault as well? Huh, right? Huh. And we get to have conversations like, "Hey, are you interested in just trying to beat this? Because I'll do that for you. It's my job. Or do you think there might be something else going on here?" And every now and then, once in a while, 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30, I'm not keeping track because I think there's something more going on. And one more time, I get to wake up and go to work feeling useful, purposeful, and whole. And my life's become one because of you. Thank you.